Welcome and thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Sitecore Water Cooler, the casual conversation podcast dedicated to covering all things related to Sitecore, including product updates, implementations, insights, getting the most out of your Sitecore investment, and more. I'm your host, John Price, Global Sitecore Practice Director and Sitecore MVP at AmericanEagle.com. We're continuing our 2023 tour of products in the composable ecosystem of Sitecore with another key technology partner, Netlify. Netlify helps empower enterprises to build and deploy composable web experiences with any tech stack. With Sitecore's move to composable architecture, headless, and hybrid deployments, the need to partner with key technology offerings such as Netlify has become even more crucial. Today, we're going to discuss Netlify's offerings and place in the Sitecore ecosystem. I'm joined at the water cooler today by Conrad McDougall, Senior Agency Partner Manager. I've had the pleasure of working with Conrad for over 5 years, dating back to his days at Coveo. And joining Conrad is Jonthan Cipriano, Lead Partner Engineer at Netlify. Conrad, Jonthan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, John. It's really exciting to be here. Obviously, you and I go way back, and what an evolution as well. Yeah, so really looking forward to this conversation today. Appreciate you having us on, and yeah, I'm sure we'll definitely cover some good ground.
Awesome.
Yeah, same here. Glad to be here, and thanks for having us.
Awesome. Really appreciate both of your time here. So, Conrad, let's kick off the show with you today. We'll start with just something simple. Let's start with your role at Netlify.
Sure. So my role at Netlify, I sit within our partnerships team, and essentially my task on a daily basis, both at a tactical and strategic level, is to work with our agency or solution partners that are out there pitching a variety of different web solutions, ensuring that they have a proper understanding of where Netlify fits, where we bring in value, and also sort of the broader vision of how we can drive success together, both inside and outside projects with solution partners out there. So a lot of work in RFPs, a lot of work tag teaming sales cycles with solution partners. It's a lot of fun. I have to say, I've been doing it for a while now, and it's been incredibly rewarding. And I've been at Netlify since February. So a lot of folks are still saying I'm kind of new, which is interesting because it's been pedal to the metal since I began. But yeah, a lot of excitement in this space.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to connect again. You and I have been working together for over 5 years, so it's exciting to be working together again, my friend. Jonthan, same question over to you. I know you're more on the technical side, but just a quick overview of what your role is at Netlify.
I lead partner engineering. I'm also on the partnerships team. I work on the technology partnership side, so we work with a lot of our CMS, ecom, database partners, and I kind of sit at the intersection between the business partnerships and product and engineering. So day to day, I'm meeting with product managers and engineers internally here at Netlify, and I'm meeting with product managers and engineers of our partners as well. And basically, I'm guiding our partners how to build a great integration on Netlify and how we can build software together between our two platforms. I started around the same time as Conrad here. I've been here since February as well. I've worked on previous developer platforms in a similar role before this, but my roots are front-end development. I had a long stint working for digital ad agencies and digital agencies, building a lot of front-end JavaScript, even Flash and Silverlight. I'm probably dating myself there, but spent a long time in the trenches building websites on the front end.
Awesome. No, I'm sure your experience is extremely valuable. I know we've enjoyed working with you guys so far, so great to hear it. The listeners on the show is a pretty healthy mix. I'm sure a lot of the developers that are listening in have heard of Netlify or probably even have worked with you guys, but for more of maybe the marketers or business decision makers that may have not, or maybe is not as familiar with Netlify, can one of you just kind of simplify, what is Netlify? What is it that you guys do, and what value do you bring to companies?
Sure, I could take that, and if you want to chime in, by all means, JC. So, sure. Brass tacks. What's interesting with Netlify is that, and part of the reason I've been so excited since joining back in February, is that we've had a very exciting and interesting evolution. The company dates back to 2014. We started, and I'm saying we started off, but let me put it this way: developers and people know us for essentially providing a development platform to build and then host front-end solutions. So again, dating back to 2014, and thinking to where we are now as it pertains to Composable, Mock Alliance, and all these things. A lot has changed since back then, but if you're looking at sort of the evolution of Netlify and where we've come from, it's really centered around enabling developers to be able to build and then ultimately deploy using our CDN front end solutions in the composable space. Taking that maybe a step further, that's relevant to marketers as well. The Mock Alliance is something that has gained a lot of momentum in recent years. A lot of individuals that I know from back in the day when I used to work at a company called Coveo, which you mentioned before. There's been a lot of individuals kind of reaching out with interest around the Mock Alliance, especially in the past 6 months, I would say. And the reason that I mention it is because essentially when you're looking at Netlify and us is sort of enabling developers and individuals who want to be able to build and host their front end solutions, we have a series of integrations into, I would say, the vast majority of the Mock Live vendors. So you think Contentful, Content Stack, Storyblock, all those guys on the CMS side. Now obviously Sitecore, who's been really focused on building out their composable strategy. So when you think of Netlify from a product perspective, you think about it as far as, again, enabling folks to sort of follow that flow and get them up and running with whatever web solutions they want to be able to deploy. But then more broadly, from sort of an experience and a knowledge perspective, when I look at our leadership team and our founders who sit on the board of the Mock Alliance, they were the ones who coined the term Jamstack. They were really driving, this entire sort of shift to composable solutions and what that means for businesses, going all the way back to 2014. So again, it's been a roller coaster type experience in the sense where we're going up and up, which has been a lot of fun. But brass tacks, that's sort of the area that we've played in traditionally. And then as we dig in a little deeper and some of the changes that have gone on this year with Netlify acquiring Gatsby, and then recently Netlify acquiring a visual editor for composable solutions called StackBit, kind of gives you an idea of maybe the longer term vision of where we want to go as an organization. And again, me being here since February, there's been a lot of changes for the better. And a lot of excitement around sort of this new vision that we have and how we've built on where we've come from to get to this point.
Awesome. And then JC, from the technical side, I mean, front end framework wise, you guys pretty open to any technology, any specific technologies, front end technologies like React or Next.js you guys specialize in, or is it pretty much open as far as what people can use with your platform?
We'd like to think we're pretty open to any technology you're bringing with us, whether that's a framework or library or a platform that you're trying to integrate with. Of course, Gatsby being a part of Netlify, that's a framework that we own and maintain. Next.js and React are obviously very high priority for us, but in the true nature of composable, right? When a customer or developer comes to us, we want to be able to support whatever tooling, whatever platform, whatever framework and library they want to choose. So we don't want to be too prescriptive of one way or another, but we have a great solutions engineering team here who will sit down with you, learn about what your goals are, what you're trying to build, and they'll obviously make recommendations on maybe some partners or some platforms or some technologies that will fit with the customer correctly. But we want to be able to support everything as much as possible, as much as we can.
Sure. No, that's great. Appreciate the overview, guys. Extremely helpful. Let's turn our attention a little bit more to the Sitecore ecosystem. I know there's been a recent announcement of an official partnership with Sitecore and Netlify, but Conrad, maybe just give us a brief history on your partnership with Sitecore, so maybe recent developments and just kind of the history of you guys in the Sitecore ecosystem.
Absolutely. So first of all, I go way back with Sitecore, as you know. So one of the sort of focal points of my role that was kind of described to me really early on is my knowledge around Sitecore, sort of how the ecosystem works. Obviously, I mean, I was a Sitecore, not to plug myself too much, but a Sitecore ambassador MVP for a number of years. So, knowing guys like yourself and sort of the key players in the Sitecore ecosystem has helped a lot to kind of shape our broader strategy on how we want to go to market with Sitecore and how we want to be engaging with sort of the top tier solution partners like yourselves to be able to drive value in the space. As far as timeline goes, I'm sure before I joined back in February, sort of this idea of approaching vendors like Sitecore and examining partnerships with them at some point, sort of came up in discussion. But when we really put things into practice was back in the spring, as far as kind of getting out there, meeting with the who's who, getting connected with Sitecore's tech partner leadership, going all the way up to Dave O'Flanagan, as far as the leadership level goes, and sort of getting sponsorship from him, and then also interfacing with Steve, Sitecore CEO, as well, on sort of how we want to be able to build this out. So it dates back to the spring timeframe as far as when the building blocks started to get put in place. The first real sort of headfirst dive into Sitecore as far as the ecosystem goes, and then also me kind of being out of the Sitecore world for a minute, now coming back into it, was during Sitecore's DX event back in Boston a number of months ago. And obviously, you and I caught up, John. I know, as usual, getting pulled in 10 million different directions. But that was sort of where we spent a lot of time putting a lot of the ideas and thought processes that we had around this ecosystem into place. And what I mean by that is we wanted to, with myself and then the VP of our team, Stephen Larson, wanted to sort of really sit down with partners and dig in, recognizing that Sitecore solution partner strategy, they're very partner focused, and the entire ecosystem is sort of driven by this ecosystem of partners. So it was a very busy day, to put it lightly. I think we maybe had 10 or 15 minutes total of downtime between running from one booth to the next. But what it did help with was, one, we spent about 2 hours sitting with Sitecore's partner leadership team. And we also, at that point, we were already kind of in deeper technical discussions around what an integration would look like. And more importantly, what Sitecore, is sort of looking at us for. And I think there's a number of things that there's a number of reasons why they're engaging with us. And the one that I would put above all else is, for one, obviously having, more options as it pertains to development and hosting is going to be better for them and better for you guys and the rest of the community, no matter what. But more importantly, recognizing, to my point about, members of our leadership sitting on the Mock Alliance and coining the term Jamstack, and just sort of being thought leaders in the composable space. And obviously where Sitecore is headed, and with the amount of focus they're placing at an organizational level around composable solutions, there's also an angle of them turning to us for education for clients and for assistance in sort of driving the composable narrative forward, and driving the value that goes into that in conversation with clients as well. And that's really what we've been doing ever since the Sitecore DX event. We've signed some clients that have been incredibly satisfied with what they've done, especially the speed at which they've managed to go live, which we can get into a little bit later. But taking that, those conversations at that point to where we are now, and JC, you can speak to the deeper levels of our integration and everything else. But we have an integration today. The goal was to be able to support both sort of hybrid headless solutions that are set up on XM, but also, of course, being able to support Sitecore's flagship composable CMS, XM Cloud. And we're now in a position where there's been a lot of inbound outreach. How do we get involved? How do we get going? A lot of rekindling relationships from back in the day, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, to open up conversations around how do we drive value together. And now we're sort of we're sort of on the precipice of something big with Sitecore. There's a lot of kind of exciting things coming down the pipe as we get into the fall months. But yeah, I would say up till today, there's just been a lot of work done, both from an integration perspective, getting that up and running, signing some clients, generating some hype, building some momentum. And you can definitely expect to see us in Minneapolis at the DX event, and then going forward to have much more of a presence in the Sitecore ecosystem, which I'm really excited about.
Awesome. That's a great overview. JC, anything you can drive as far as technical advancements you guys have made specifically with Sitecore this year from a product perspective?
I can speak to that a little bit at a high level. So we have some customers on Sitecore on Netlify now. I think what we're really focused on working on at the moment is just the developer experience of building and deploying your Sitecore websites on Netlify, and everything that comes along with that. So making sure it's going to be well documented, putting their Sitecore's developer tooling through its paces on Netlify, and making sure it's compatible, and addressing things and making some improvements that make it easier for the developer to build and deploy and maintain sites. So that's where we're at right now. Netlify has always been about just lowering barriers for developers, and we try to apply that when we work with partners as well. So whenever a partner wants to work with us, that's kind of my job to kind of look at what that developer experience is going to look like when they try to integrate the two platforms, and try to make it as easy as possible. I always try to say, like, as close to one click possible as possible, but you can't always get there, but that's kind of the goal, right? So um, I think we always say that we have one time to make a first impression, right?
Mm-hmm.
So right when a developer attempts to deploy or build the partner technology on Netlify, that's when you're making your first impression there. Like, if it's really easy to do and nothing breaks and everything works as expected, you're going to be in the right mind frame of building out the rest of your website and maintaining your website, and hopefully thinking that you're going to have a great experience working with both of the platforms. So that's where my focus is at the moment, on the developer experience side, and how that all works, and working with some architects and senior engineers on the Sitecore side to build that out.
Awesome. This is a perfect segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you guys. And, there are other options out there. I mean, in the composable space, for a lot of clients, it's become a little bit more complicated, right? Not just from, the front end hosting side or development side, but just there's a lot of options you can pick from now. So for the listeners on the call, right, there are a few other options out there, so what are some of your competitive advantages and differentiators maybe against some of the other solutions a Sitecore client could pick from?
I can speak to things at a business level, and then JC, naturally, if there's anything you want to add from the technical side, by all means. How we kind of approach competition is interesting, rather than sort of singling out. Obviously, we know who the competitors are, and we know how we stack up against them. But what we always try to do is zero in on Netlify's strengths. And what I mean by that is taking feedback from clients that have deployed on Netlify or live on Netlify, or have maybe leveraged several of our products outside of just hosting, and then sort of relay that back internally and double down on our strengths, and of course over time try to to improve in areas where we're not necessarily weaker, but that could use some work. And what I mean by all this is, one of the things that I've noticed in my time here so far, and one of the key points of feedback that has now come from partners on an ongoing basis, but I would even deem more importantly customers, has been the way that we engage with clients throughout the entire sales process, and then post sale with our engineering teams and support teams in particular. And to kind of double click on that, the feedback that I've seen, both written and verbal, coming from pretty much every call that I've been on, or most calls. I'll leave that little bit of leeway for interpretation. But most calls and most clients that work with us, what they point out is that they really receive white glove support from start to finish. So when they're getting messages from our SDR folks, kind of opening up a discussion, I think we do a really good job zeroing in on pain points that are relevant to clients, rather than trying to shove a solution down their throat that they don't otherwise require. And also qualifying in and out. I mean, we have self-serve tiers for Netlify as far as our pricing model is concerned, where you can literally just sign up, pay with a credit card, and deploy your own personal blog as you see fit on whatever stack you want to be able to to execute this type of project on. And then of course we have our enterprise plans that are designed for large organizations, or mid to large organizations that are building and deploying solutions in the composable space. And the feedback that they've provided, and the folks on the self-serve plans as well, is, one, a very positive experience from a product perspective, but two, when we get into some of these large organizations, and I know we both know this, or all three of us know this really, really well, but calling back to some of the projects we worked on back in the day, John, where the types of challenges that businesses are having are not, are not the types of feedback points that you're going to find on a Reddit thread about front end frameworks. And they're not the type of questions that are going to be asked on Twitter or now X. It's just a different selling model, and it's a different solutioning model as well. And I think this is something that Netlify has embraced. It's something that I've seen coming out of the organization. It's something that has been called out or has been celebrated by our clients, that every single touch point they have, from the SDR to the account executive to the customer success manager to the support team in particular, we've got an endless amount of positive points of feedback about our support team, is that we go far beyond just troubleshooting individual sort of framework or developer oriented questions, and we really present a cohesive package and a cohesive model from a product perspective, but more importantly from a support perspective at each of these individual touch points. And the types of conversations that we're having, that maybe get a little bit more specific, and this is, again, kudos to our customer success team and our account management team, and also the support engineers that are involved and solution engineers that are involved in those discussions, is that we do a really good job troubleshooting, enterprise level challenges that leadership folks are facing, and elevating the conversation to those types of profiles and organizations, so that we're getting beyond just, hey, I need to host my front end site, and there's how much budget I have, and there's however many options out there, so we're just talking to you guys to check a box. We've done a really good job transforming a lot of those discussions into, oh, well, actually there are X, Y, and Z challenges that the entire organization is facing, and raising awareness around how can we be more than just a technology vendor on a list. How can we truly be a partner that is going to embrace an organization's growth plan over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years? And especially with this, again, bringing it back to Sitecore, with this focus on XM Cloud, and just being a part of the Sitecore ecosystem, all of these engagements come at the enterprise level. And we're talking to universities, to FinServ, to all these different companies. And the types of questions that they have and the types of challenges that they see are very different from the technology companies in Silicon Valley that are stoked about beta features in Next.js. And we want to test this out, and we want to do this. And we have a roster of those clients and definitely appreciate them. But at the same time, now as we're sort of continuing to embrace very large organizations, that when they're engaging on an RFP or a project, they're really going through a full digital transformation. And I think we do a really, really good job up against the competition in embracing that type of solutioning model, and employing a presentation and engagement strategy that's really conducive to enabling them to achieve long-term success.
I definitely want to hear from JC in a second, but just a couple really quick important points that you mentioned, Conrad, I want to highlight is you guys aren't out there just slinging software, right? You're trying to solve business problems,
Right.
you try to tie back value, and then you're seeing it through to the end as an actual partner. That's great to hear, right? I'm sure some people that work with some larger software companies may not feel that. So knowing that you guys are putting that focus on it will definitely probably lead to a lot of your future term success. That's great to hear. So I definitely want to hear about some more specifics on some actual maybe customers you guys have worked with, or some good examples there. But before I do, JC, back to you as far as like competitive advantages or just differentiators of you maybe versus the competition. Anything else you want to highlight from a technical side?
Yeah, I think what Conrad mentioned, I think is really important for decision makers and engineers and developers. I think obviously if you look at our feature tables and you do like these comparisons, you'll see that there's some security things that we have on the technical side that are a competitive advantage, I think, for us. Maybe it is the diversity of frameworks we support, or maybe how agnostic we are when it comes to framework support on our platform. Obviously, there's those type of things as well. I think once you've done the demo and you've gone through the comparison of feature to feature, I totally agree with Conrad. There's how we work with the customer at an engineering and an architecture level, with our solutions engineers all the way down to our support engineers, is really great. I've worked on a few developer platforms before. I've been a customer building websites and working with technology solutions. And the team is really great here. I really enjoy seeing how they work. Just to give a couple of examples, we had a very large customer that wanted to run like a massive load test, right? On their own infrastructure, and on ours. And our support engineers really, dug in, kind of asking like what their objectives are, what they really want to test, and kind of help them tailor a load testing plan, um, you know, that will help them, reach their goals, and so on and so forth. Another example, most recently, we recently signed like a large retailer, and they were looking for um, a security solution, for their website. Um, and a solutions engineer reached out to me, and was just dropping some possible names of some solutions that we could implement and integrate with, ones that we didn't have any partnerships with. And that conversation kicks off, a whole new partnership for us, right? So then I step in, I reach out, to this company that may offer a solution, and we start talking about how we're going to integrate this together. How can we work on, delivering a security solution for this, joint customer? And then let's build an integration that, all of our future customers can utilize together. So we really dive deep into at a technical and engineering level, and try to address their solutions, their issues directly, and their objectives directly. And I think that's really kind of our competitive advantage, especially when it comes to this enterprise level, because the needs are a little bit different, right? What they're expecting from you are different, and I think we deliver that as a whole.
Awesome. And you just kind of sparked an idea and question in my head. I want to ask you both, right? And, you know, through your experience so far in qualifying these and helping clients and just say working with agencies as well, what's the biggest piece of advice you could give somebody when they may be considering Composable or when they're considering a Netlify? Like, what are some things that people maybe don't think of, or something that you guys have even learned yourselves? Like, what are some important things that people maybe overlook that should be on the forefront of their minds when they're making this type of decision?
So I have an answer for the agency side, and then I think I've got some perspectives for the client side as well. And they're kind of different, and there's a reason for that. But I mean, these conversations are actively happening these days. With sort of the folks I was working with back in the day at these different agencies, but also with new agencies that are maybe sort of newer to Composable and building out their strategy and trying to figure out the building blocks that go into that. And what I've been telling agencies, and again, take this as you will, uh, it's kind of from maybe from a different perspective for somebody that's been on the periphery of Composable and now, has been knee deep in it since February. But what I've been telling agencies that are interested in the Mock Alliance and are kind of building out their Composable strategy is to be opinionated and, examine and do your research. There are a lot of options out there. It seems like every other day there's a new member being brought into the Mock Alliance, which is very exciting. But at the same time, uh, as a result of that, and since a lot of organizations that are, maybe looking at how to build out their Composable strategy are sort of turning to the Mock Alliance as sort of a guide rail for how they should be pursuing Composable as a practice area on the agency side, and also on the client side as well. How are there, there's a lot of, again, a lot of hype around the Mock Alliance, but at the same time, there's a lot of like actionable pieces of information that you can pull from it. So I've been telling agencies to be opinionated. And what I mean by that is, again, there's so many different options out there. And it's kind of goes back to, the old saying of jack of all trades, master of none. And not to throw shade, I'm not naming any names, but there are definitely, I would say, individuals, maybe organizations to a degree out there that kind of fall into this bucket where, by virtue of trying to stay, tip of the spear as far as frameworks go, and, you know, maybe changing CMSs every other quarter, it to try to pursue, oh, this is the latest new shiny toy, and this CMS is like the gold standard. But what I have seen, again, since, again, being on the periphery and then sort of being in the space now since February, is things change really fast. and there's new solutions and there's hype about different solutions, and even looking at sort of the different technology partners that I've been engaged with, and looking at how their selling models have evolved in whatever 9 months, or 8 months, and then looking at Sitecore now, how their messaging is like, you would almost think they're kind of a contentful, or they're one of these composable only type of solutions, and it's obviously creates a lot of excitement, but at the same time, I think both on the client side and the agency side, do your research and have a lot of conversations. And what's great about different events, around, I was at Shop Talk a couple of months ago, and there's like a mock alliance event, and it was my first time really getting out there, catching up with some familiar faces, but also really kind of, taking diving headfirst into the composable ecosystem. So I had conversations with Content Stack. I spoke to BigCommerce about their composable strategy. I was talking to Elastic Path a bunch, which is a commerce offering in the composable space. And everybody sort of has their flavor of how things should be done. Same thing with Storyblock as well. I spent a lot of time with them. And what I realize is that there's a lot of there are definitely a lot of similarities from a product and technical perspective. Obviously, there's some perks to certain solutions versus others, especially at the CMS level, because so many options out there. But it's really easy to get caught up and to get confused, and to end up in a situation where you know the decision maker at, let's say, a university, higher ed, or some of these more industries that are not tip of the spear, that want to go composable but don't necessarily have all the different pieces of information that they're required, because there's a lot of information needed to make those types of decisions. And what happens, is that they have all these vendors come in, and you've got, you name it, off the mock alliance, and they're all coming in, they're pitching their solution, and they're talking about, and ultimately they're saying, it's different, again, different flavors, but they're saying a lot of the same stuff. So what happens is that you'll have a number of different things go on, but ultimately when it comes to the decision maker, who, again, for these types of industries, is not going to be, and I mean, in most cases, is not necessarily going to be a technology first type of profile, or a web developer, or just a, somebody that's knee deep in frameworks day in, day out. And they ultimately, make the decision, oh, we're going to punt this out to next year. It's too much for us to take on. We have to sign so many different contracts. So that's why I say, like, be opinionated, and reach out and do your research, and expect it to be a process. Don't expect it to be, a quick digital transformation and boom, you're all set up, and you've got, you're on Sanity and Commerce Tools and whatever else. Employ due diligence, make sure that you spend the right amount of time, and really grill these vendors. We get grilled all the time. So it's expected. It comes with the territory. And yeah, I would just say, really do your research and learn about composable as a technology ecosystem, and then dig into things like, okay, we're going to talk to X, Y, and Z platform, and kind of go from there. But don't expect it to be a really quick turnaround as far as making a decision, if you want to make the right decision. But what you can expect is, timelines to be significantly reduced, depending on the project, as far as getting a project live or getting some sites live. And that's that's where kind of we come in, and what's been exciting about Netlify. But yeah, do your homework.
Awesome. Those are really great insights and great advice. JC, anything on the technical side, people that they should be considering kind of forefront of mind?
Yeah, just to double down on that again, Conrad, that was really great. I think, do your research, do your homework. Like, if you're a developer or engineer, I would say stay open-minded, be open-minded. Some developers are always want to be at the cutting edge, and they're going to be, oh yeah, I know about composable and serverless and headless, and that's the direction I want to go. Or some maybe, more traditional, and be attached, to their development workflows that they rolled themselves. But, kind of be open-minded, and kind of learn about, what type of solutions are out there. I was having a conversation with our head of partnerships the other day after coming off a partner call, and if you're going headless or composable, or going with a platform like Netlify, it's really, you're adopting like a developer or development philosophy, right? There's many ways to build websites, deploy websites, and maintain websites. But if you're going with a solution like Netlify, it's opinionated. obviously we're biased and we think this is where the future is in the composable space, and using all of the services that Sitecore and others provide. But especially if you're a large organization, make sure the leaders, the engineering leaders, the marketing leaders, whomever that is going to be affected by this, are bought into it. Right. I think especially if the decision is made and maybe an engineering team is not bought into it, um, it's going to be kind of a little bit of a battle to maintain your websites and deploy your websites, where you may not be taking advantage of our build systems, and the composable nature of the websites and everything. So be bought into it and understand what you're getting into, see the value of it. And once you do that, it may not be the solution for you. It may be the solution is you stay on AWS, and you're rolling your own type of platform there that's custom tailored to you. But yeah, be open minded, do your research, do your homework, make sure you understand the value that you're getting out of it, and make sure the whole organization does as well. I think that's my strongest tips. And whenever we engage with a partner for the first time, or when I've ever been on calls with our solutions engineers, we that's kind of what we try to address first, right? Do you know about Netlify and platforms like us? Do you know about composable approach to developing websites? And if they don't, that's where we try to educate and then help them make that decision. But I think that comes first, and then everything else comes after, like who you choose to work with, how all the technology works itself. But I think understanding that first is really really important.
Awesome. No, really good insights, guys. Great advice. Last question of the day here. I always like to ask the guests of the show, like, can you share a customer or an example of a customer that's using Netlify really well, right? You don't necessarily have to name the actual customer, like the actual company, but like any great examples lately, even if on the Sitecore ecosystem, even better, but just any examples of customers that are using Netlify really well, or something that you say, hey, this would be a really good way to kind of use things in the future.
Sure. So I think we've got two examples. Maybe JC, if you want to dig a little bit into the very large insurance company out of Switzerland, on Sitecore. The one that I wanted to share, because I think it's got a lot of recognition across, especially the developer community, but any gamer out there is going to know this company really quick. But Riot Games has been an amazing partner of ours. They kind of embraced their composable strategy a little while ago. We've been working with them for quite a long time, and they're sort of expanding the way that we collaborate on a regular basis. And I think it's simple. The reason for that is just the successes that they've had with the platform. We've got everything from a full, recently published full case study with them, to some video content and interview, to quotes from them about their positive experiences. And obviously, not to throw too much out there, but looking at the successes they've had, we're looking at metrics like website build times going from 15 to 25 minutes to 3 to 5 minutes. Project planning, being able to collaborate within the platform, them being bogged down by 2 to 3 week release schedules that have now been reduced to less than 3 days. So agility improvements, also significant reduction in bandwidth. Obviously, as the folks out there are aware, with games like League of Legends, you have to imagine that there's going to be extremely high traffic as far as individuals wanting to learn more, or just read content about the game, or everything that goes into that. And we've actually managed to reduce their bandwidth usage by 65%, taking them down from 200 terabytes a month to less than 70 terabytes. And this is the type of impact that we're having, and that we've been having since we started way back when, with organizations like Riot Games, who again been amazing partners, very quick to to engage with us, and especially upon seeing the value that they're getting, as I mentioned, continue to to invest in Netlify as a product, but more importantly as a partner. And the last thing I'll sort of cap things off with is one of their senior web developers actually delivered a quote that we have in our case study. And it's a relatively short quote, so I'll just read it off here. We aspire to be the most player-focused gaming company in the world, and Netlify absolutely carries the same spirit of aspiring to be the most developer-focused technology company in the world. Ultimately, there was a sense of deep collaboration, understanding, meeting our business requirements, and providing extremely knowledgeable and highly professional solutions every single step along the way. The entire team demonstrated what means not only create and facilitate a smooth transition, but also showed what a good partnership for web-based experience looks like. When two different companies share the same level of passion for users, magic happens. So going back to what I was saying, or what we were all kind of hitting on earlier, John, as it pertains to how we approach customers of this caliber or of all calibers and the level of support that we provide, I think that quote, especially for somebody that's coming from somebody that's hands-on with the product and that is seeing the value being delivered in real time, I think it's incredibly impactful, and that's obviously the level of service that we've been providing and that we plan on continuing to provide. So if anything, again, with a company like Riot Games and the amount of engagement that they get as far as their player base, it's definitely something to be celebrated, getting that type of quote from the team. And yeah, there's more exciting things to be coming down the pipe with both Netlify and Riot Games.
Awesome. That's a great case study. JC, any examples out there that you want to highlight from the technical perspective? Anyone that's using the platform really well at the moment?
Yeah, I think Conrad mentioned it earlier. Earlier this year, we worked with a very large insurance company out of Switzerland that wanted to deploy Sitecore on Netlify. And this is one of the first engagements we had, I think, with Sitecore on Netlify. And they were, going through the deployment process, and they were running into a few snags here and there. And I do think they probably would have figured it out on their own just by us answering some questions every once in a while. But going back to kind of how we show up with our customers and to help our customers, I think we really dove in there and solutioned something for them that would work, whether it was their solutions engineer going off and doing their independent research and finding some things there, or us working with Sitecore to figure out what the solution was going to be. I think that provided really good experience for their engineers there. I think it was just a really great example on how we worked together on our side and delivered a solution. So the solution engineer ran into some issues that they were running into, did a bunch of research. He fed that over to me, like these are the technical issues that they're running into. How do we solve this? We were really early in our Sitecore partnership, so I started reaching out to some of the engineering contacts over there and saying this is where it's failing. Where do you think it's going wrong? And then over a relatively short period of time, with the information we provided, Sitecore just provided a guide, step by step. This is exactly what you need to do to deploy, your Sitecore site on Netlify. We gave that over to the customer, and it worked right away, and they were extremely happy. Right, with obviously there was some time there where people were getting a little bit nervous, but the solution worked right when we delivered it. So I think that's a good example of how we show up and help the engineers that are at these companies that work with us to help them deploy, and how we work with our partners as well. And that kind of laid the foundation of what we're working on at the moment. Some lessons learned there on how can we make that a little bit easier. What can we use there to scale up and provide to other developers and customers as well. So I think that was a really good example of that. Keep an eye open on our case studies and stuff like that. You might actually see something there and more information on exactly who that is and how that all panned out. But
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Really appreciate the insight there, JC. Conrad, Jonthan, really good conversation today. Really appreciate your time coming on the show. Thanks for joining us at the Water Cooler. I look forward to working with both of you more and more, collaborating both with more of you in the future. And again, I hope to have you both back on the Water Cooler again soon here. I know Minneapolis DX is coming up, so maybe we can schedule something late this year, early next, and hear more about the great insights and the developments Netlify has coming again soon.
Absolutely. Sounds great, Sean. Really appreciate you hosting it today. Great conversation. And again, I mean, we're really just, for all intents and purposes, the start of this journey. So the next time we chat, we'll, in this format, we'll definitely have more to share. And for anyone out there listening, never hesitate to hit us up. We're always game.
Awesome. Cool.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks again to Conrad McDougall and Jonthan Cipriano from Netlify for joining us today on the Sitecore Water Cooler podcast, a casual conversation between colleagues and peers centered around all things Sitecore. I'm your host, John Price, and until the next time we meet at the water cooler, be sure to subscribe to the Sitecore Water Cooler podcast wherever you find your podcasts. This episode is brought to you by AmericanEagle.com Studios, with special thanks to executive producers Renee Nelson, Julia Klepich, and Brian Winger.